Welcome, everybody, to tonight's call. We are so glad that you're here. Every week, we do calls about metabolic health, and tonight's call is not just about metabolic health, it's more specifically about gut health. Do you struggle with gut health? Do you struggle with constipation or diarrhea? Maybe you have bloating or gas or cramping. Maybe you have an autoimmune condition. Maybe you're struggling with your skin health, your hormonal health, your mental health, your metabolic health, your overall health. This all ties back to the gut. And on tonight's call, we're going to be doing something really, really cool with one of the top experts in the world, and I'm not exaggerating, on the subject of gut health. We have a microbiologist with us tonight that's going to be teaching. I just listened to a podcast with him on it, and I was just drooling at the information. It was so good. And so I've got butterflies in my stomach right now during the intro, getting ready for this call, just because it really, really is exciting. And we have a great guest on tonight. We're going to have some incredible stories tonight. Now, I know that many of you are here for the very first time. So let me bring you up to speed and just set the table for this call. What are these calls? Every week, we do calls to educate. We want to educate and change the world through education. Now, most of us are following a very simple protocol. All right. Many of us have a history of health problems, struggled with our diet, with weight control, blood sugar control, cholesterol control. Some of the women with PCOS, some of the men with various problems that are man problems, right? And many of us have struggled with gut health over the years, but not anymore. We follow a very simple protocol that has been a game changer. And the protocol is just this simple, okay? We do a little bit of fasting and a little bit of fiber. A little bit of fasting and a little bit of fiber. And some fasting and fiber can make all the difference. Believe me when I say that, okay? In fact, if you're on the chat and you've been here before and you're following the protocol, you're doing a little bit of fasting and a little bit of fiber, right? And it has been a game changer for you. Would you write the word happy in the chat? Put happy in the chat. There's Brian Henderson, says he's down 12 pounds so far. Yeah, look at all this. Happy, 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 happy. Okay. Look at all the people that are happy on this protocol. Now, you might say, holy cow, this is awesome. There's 382 people here in the 383, 385, 386, 390 now, 392. This is growing quickly. There's about 400 people in the live Zoom, and there must be 200 people that have already written happy. So there's many of you that are on the protocol. All right. We're going to get into what it's actually doing and why it's working so well here as we go. All right. Now, many of you are also new. Maybe you're here for the very first time and you're clueless about this protocol. If you're new, do me a favor, put a new in the chat. Put new in the chat if you're either here for the first time or you're here for the second or third time, but you haven't really started the protocol yet. Gina says new, Zoom user new, Janet new, Nancy new. Okay, lots of new people here as well, especially on Facebook, YouTube, and on the restreams. Many of you are new, okay? So this fasting and fiber is really, really simple, but we do fasting with a little twist and fiber with a little twist. And this little protocol, these twists, make all the difference in the world. So as I begin this call, let me just share my screen real fast. I'm going to introduce what we're going to be talking about, and then I've got to get to our guest. We want to save as much time as possible for our interview with our expert today. This here is a photo of me and my dad. And my dad is meant the world to me. My dad was my best friend, my hero, right? And 8 years ago, my dad died from stage 4 colon cancer. Before my dad got sick with colon cancer, he had high blood sugar, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. He struggled with weight control most of my life, most of his adult life, rather. My dad also had a very serious skin disease known as psoriasis that covered basically from wrist to ankle. My dad had psoriasis all over his body. Some of the drugs that my dad took for his for his psoriasis had some side effects, and one of the side effects of the biologics he was taking was colon cancer. And so my poor dad died. And when my dad got sick, I started to study these topics and try to find, research anything that I could to maybe, just maybe, save my dying father. And unfortunately, it was a little too late for my dad. But what I've learned, I've wanted to share with the world. And we want to share with you on tonight's call a little bit of that. Okay. Now, many people know about things like diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver, but they may not know that the root cause of many of these problems is something called insulin resistance. The insulin resistance is either directly or indirectly related to a lot of these metabolic health conditions, things like obesity, fatty liver, okay, diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically, right? Migraine headaches, Alzheimer's, dementia, heart disease is the number one killer in the world. PCOS is the number one cause of infertility among women. And all of it really comes back to this bad guy, this insulin resistance. And on many of our calls, we talk about insulin resistance. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight as well, because it's all interconnected. But did you know that an equal culprit can be something called dysbiosis or damage to the gut? When somebody has a damaged gut, a leaky gut, you may have heard that term. When your gut health is not working properly, it can lead to metabolic health problems. It can lead to skin health problems. My dad had psoriasis, right? Skin cancer runs in my family. It can lead to cardiovascular problems, mental health problems, and even breathing problems, and so much more. Okay. So much of our overall health starts in the gut. And on tonight's call, we have one of the top experts in the world to speak to us on the subject of gut health and how this all works. This is Kiran Krishnan. Krishnan, am I saying that right? The last name Kiran? Kiran Krishnan. And
You are.
all right, thank you. Kieran's a microbiologist who is one of the co-founder of several, he's a co-founder of several different companies, but one that you may have heard of is Microbiome Labs. Kieran has published now 18 different trials or study papers on the subject of the microbiome and on gut health. He has been published in several functional medicine textbooks, and over the last stretch has lectured to more than 150,000 doctors and practitioners in at least 22 different countries. So this is, the guy of guys when it comes to all things gut health. And on today's call, we've got a few questions, and maybe Kieran, as we kick this off, when we talk about gut health, when we talk about dysbiosis or leaky gut, what are some of the symptoms? What would somebody be experiencing on a day-to-day basis who has a damaged gut?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, Trent. And it's so exciting to see all of the different faces and the comments and interaction from people on the Zoom. I think one of the things it says is that obviously people are really, really interested in taking control of their health. And understanding the tools that they have accessible to them. And one of my biggest passions is, of course, educating people. And the more when we know better, we can do better, and we can empower ourselves with the right information. So thank you so much for letting me be here. Yes, so everything that you shared in that slide, the connection between gut being the central driver in many of those systemic dysfunctions like insulin resistance, cardiovascular disease, brain issues, skin issues, those are all really, really well elucidated in the literature. So then let's talk about when your gut is dysfunctional, right? So we use the term dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is a general term for having an imbalance within your gut microbiome. But let's talk a little bit about what that imbalance typically means. That imbalance usually means number one, low diversity, right? And number two, low levels of keystone species. Now, these keystone species are a number of organisms that are so important for the overall structure and stability of the microbiome that they're called keystone because if they disappear or their numbers are too low, a lot of the structural elements of that ecosystem start to fall apart, right? So think low diversity, low keystone species. That's a very inherent feature of a dysbiotic gut. Then the second part of it is an elevation in what we call pathobionts. Pathobionts are organisms that have pathogenic tendency. Now, most of us don't have really strong primary pathogens in our gut. If we did, we'd be sick all the time. We'd have chronic diarrhea like C. diff, for example, or like traveler's diarrhea. Those are caused by primary pathogens. What many of us have are pathobionts that are opportunistic, right? They can be pathogenic. but they can also play nice depending on the ecosystem. And so when the ecosystem becomes disrupted, they start rearing their ugly heads and they start doing things within the system that disrupt the entire microbiome, the entire digestive system, the entire immune system, and then thereby all of these other systems that are dependent on it, right? So what do we feel when we are dysbiotic? Well, from a digestive perspective, the most common things we feel are bloating, gas, abdominal discomfort when you eat. You start to see either constipation or diarrhea or switching between the two. And a general irregularity with bowel movements. If you follow the Bristol stool chart, you'll see stools that are on the opposite ends of the chart, not so much in the middle, meaning tiny little pebble-like stools, little pearls and beads, or very loose stool, very wet stool that is kind of unformed. And then, of course, coming along with that are food sensitivities that people start to develop over time. They simply can't tolerate things. So those are the digestive symptoms. Now, along with that, you can have the systemic effects as well. The most common things that people feel are fatigue, brain fog, mood alterations and mood changes, sleep disruption, right? Because of this sympathetic parasympathetic balance issue, skin flares, and it may be chronic or it may be acute. It may flare up from time to time and then maybe normalize over a period of time. Joint aches, right? Joint aches are a very common symptom of gut dysfunction or gut dysbiosis. And then you could see things like increase in frequency of things like infection and so on. And then metabolically, if you measure things, you'll see weight gain, especially in the visceral fat area. You'll see insulin resistance. You'll see an elevation of inflammation, because ultimately, all of this dysfunction leads to chronic low-grade inflammation.
Okay, this is amazing. I'm gonna just show everybody real fast. You referenced the Bristol stool chart. Let me reference this so that people can see it. The Bristol stool chart is something I've actually talked about quite a bit in some of the videos I put out on social. What are we looking at here when we look at this Bristol stool chart, Kieran?
Yeah, so just a quick 101 about how stool is formed, right? So we're supposed to have adequate amount of fiber in our stool. Most of the fiber should be soluble fiber, which means it's binding water and it's holding water into the stool that allows the stool to be formed. And then some of it is insoluble, making the outside of the stool kind of hydrophobic. Right. So then the water is in the intestinal walls and it can get absorbed by the large intestine. And then there's supposed to be significant peristaltic activity. Peristaltic activity is a smooth muscle contraction that occurs throughout the lining of your gut, throughout the whole lining of your gut, starting in your stomach all the way down to the large bowel. Now, that combination of good bulking of the stool, a good formation of the stool because of well digested food in the small intestine, and then well fermented food in the large intestine, that good water absorption by a healthy colon, and then a good amount of gel formation by adequate soluble fiber. All of that should lead to the formation of this really great cylinder of stool that sinks to the bottom of the toilet. Right now, some people may notice they have floating stools. It may be a little bit of a cylinder, but it may float. Now, that is an indication that there's dysfunction within the gut. In particular, it indicates that you have an inability to digest fats. There's too much fat in your stool, and so fat and water, as you know, don't mix well. So the stool tends to float to the top. If you see type 1 at the very top, what that means is that the bowels don't have sufficient pressure in squeezing. You're not getting enough fiber in the diet. You're not forming the structure of the stool with the fiber, and there's very poor fermentation happening in the large bowel. When you go all the way down to the bottom, which is the other extreme, type 7, you see very loose stool. What that means is that individual has a lot of inflammation in their colon. Inflammation in the colon negates water absorption. Keep in mind, most of your water is absorbed in your colon. So if your colon cannot absorb water because it's inflamed and the lining is damaged, then the stool becomes too watery and it comes out like that, right? So you have these two ends of the spectrum. One of them at the very top, you've got really poor peristaltic activity. You've got poor fermentation that's happening. You're clearly inadequate in your dietary fiber. And then at the very bottom, you've got a lot of inflammation. So if you're number 5, 6, 7, you likely have elevated inflammation in the bowels.
So if we're going for the best possible poop, are we looking at 3 and 4? Is that about
We
where we want
want
to be?
3 and 4, yeah. And in fact, what you want, have you heard the term, Trent, ghost poop?
I have. Can you tell
Yes.
our audience what ghost poop is?
Yes, so what you really want is a poop that looks like 3 and 4, but you want ghost poop. The concept of ghost poop is really the idea that the poop is so clean, well formed, well structured that you defecate and it pinches off and there's like virtually nothing to wipe. It's that clean, right? So what you really want for your overall health is to try to achieve type 3, type 4 ghost poop. And then you know you're doing really, really well.
Okay, so that was a little bit of a sidetrack. Sorry about that, but you when you brought up the Bristol stool chart, I wanted to use that reference. Okay, so just briefly, as before I move on to the next question, a lot of people with serious autoimmune conditions have
Mhm.
been told that this is possibly, maybe if there's anything that could fix it, perhaps fixing the gut could fix the autoimmune condition. What is your general take on that? Is that true? Is
Yeah,
that a little, are we giving somebody too much hope?
no, it's actually not hyperbolic at all. In fact, there's been a lot of work on this. One of the researchers that I've known that has done a lot of work on this is his first name is Alessio Fasano and his last name is Fasano. He's at Harvard, and he's done a lot of work on the impact of a dysfunctional gut on triggering an autoimmune response. So to give people just a very quick immunology 101 and how the gut impacts autoimmunity, right? What Fasano has shown, for example, is that you need 3 legs to the stool in order to develop autoimmunity, right? Number one, some genetic susceptibility, but most people with genetic susceptibility, if they don't have these other 2 legs, they never ever develop autoimmunity. Number two is a environmental trigger. That means it's going to be a illness or a medication or something that kind of triggers and sends your immune system into a tizzy, if you will, into a snowballing cascade of dysfunction, right? So a lot of people heard during COVID this concept of the cytokine storm, right? So things that can trigger aspects like the cytokine storm. So often it's a viral illness, and then the third part is actually endotoxemia or a leaky and dysfunctional gut. Now, why? And the thing is, if you have the first 2 parts of the stool and you don't have a leaky gut, you won't develop autoimmunity, right? So why is the gut part so important? Well, keep in mind that roughly 80% of your immune tissue is in your gut. What does that mean? That means your immune sampling tissue, right? You've got all of this tissue in the lining of your gut called the lymphoid tissue. And the lymphoid tissue, and it's often abbreviated GALT, gut-associated lymphoid tissue, the purpose of that tissue is to sample all the things that are entering your body, right? Almost everything we breathe, everything we encounter, one way or the other, is going to get into our digestive tract. When it gets into the digestive tract, the immune tissue has to sample it to figure out if it's something it should attack or should not attack, right? And if it learns that most of the things coming through are things that it should not attack, that is the development of oral tolerance. Oral tolerance is really, really important. There are immune cells that do all of this sampling. They're called dendritic cells. They reach across the lining of your gut and they sample stuff that's coming in the mucosa, and they decide whether it's a thing to attack or not. Here's the fun thing. They decide whether it's a thing to attack or not based on the context in which they are sampling it, meaning what the microbiome is doing at the time. If the microbiome has high diversity, there's low inflammation, there's high amounts of short chain fatty acid. Those are the contexts in which it samples the food particles, environmental particles, and then it activates a regulatory part of the immune system called the Treg system that says, don't attack this thing. You have to be tolerant of it, right? If it samples it in the context of a dysfunctional microbiome, meaning high pathobionts, low keystone species, low diversity, low short chain fatty acids, that context causes the dendritic cell to activate an immune response against that antigen. That means a loss of tolerance. That means anytime you see that antigen, your body's going to attack it, even though it shouldn't, because it's just a food particle, right? So that type of oral tolerance loss is dependent on what the microbiome looks like. Now, that is also the same system that governs the risk in where your immune system accidentally identifies your own tissue as a potential target. It's called a bystander effect. Your own tissue can get caught up in infections and all that in this melee of battle that's going on, and your immune system can accidentally identify your own protein as the target and start attacking it. The thing is that regulatory part of the immune system suppresses those responses. But the regulatory part of the immune system is completely dependent on a diverse, healthy microbiome, right? And in fact, this mechanism is so important that the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2025 in physiology and medicine was given to three scientists that discovered this T regulatory system and the way it functions, because it plays such a big role in so many conditions, right? So the microbiome is at the core of autoimmune response.
Okay, so I'm going to bring this down to my level for a moment for those of us that are really, a little slower than you are, Kieran, because you're so knowledgeable about this. And I just want to make sure I've got this. So, whenever I breathe, whenever I eat something, anything that comes into my body, it actually isn't really in my body yet. It's in my plumbing system. And whether or not that leaks into my body in a good way or a negative way has to do with how my gut is functioning. And this gut, I listened to your podcast, which was so amazing. You've got something like 26 feet of intestines or something like that. And if you were to lay out the surface, you said that it's the size of a tennis court. So
Professional tennis court, yeah, yep.
a tennis court, right? So it's the surface area of a tennis court inside each of us. And little parts of that tennis court may have experienced damage. There may be maybe some leaks, some cracks in that tennis court where we didn't take care of it well. And so then if I eat something like, let's say, gluten, and the gluten is going through my system, and I have not taken care of my gut, or I have a damaged gut, and we're going to talk about how to take care of the gut in just a moment, right? If I haven't taken care of my gut, some of that gluten may slip into a crack, go into the wrong place where it's not supposed to be, and my body might say, "This is an intruder. Attack it." And now every time I eat gluten, I don't have a tolerance for gluten anymore. My body reacts negatively. And so am I saying this right, or have I said anything wrong so far?
No, no, I think you're generally correct. And I think that's a great way to think about it. Yes.
Okay, so perfect. So what is it? Why are so many people experiencing these symptoms? I mean, I think I read somewhere the other day, more than 1 in 5 American adults now have irritable bowel syndrome. I've started to be able to kind of pick these people out when I go out and eat socially. They're the
Hmm.
ones who say absolutely zero spice on the food, or have very, very, they're, it seems like it's everywhere. So why are
Yeah.
so many people experiencing this? What is the root cause of these problems?
Yeah, and I'll just give you a quick thing on the prevalence. So I've published a couple of studies on endotoxemia, which is the clinical effect of leaky gut, which I'll give a quick explanation to. But that's how leaky gut drives disease processes in areas like, the pancreas, the liver, the skin, and all that, right? This process of endotoxemia. Um, when we looked at healthy young individuals, average age of 23, that means no obesity, never been diagnosed with any condition, not being managed for any condition, no medications, normal metabolic profile, all of that, right? 55 to 60% of them had severe leaky gut. They were just what we call subclinical. They were asymptomatic, right? And so the prevalence of this issue of intestinal permeability, leaky gut that leads to endotoxemia is so high among adults in the Western world. And so then we have to look at what could be causing it. Now, in my view, and there's some good data behind this. Number one, a low fiber, ultra processed food diet, right? So high calories, low fiber. We've been able to show, working with the University of North Texas in a couple of studies, where just a really high caloric meal alone can induce some leakiness in the gut, right? High sugar, high calories, and so on. So ultra processed, high caloric, low fiber meals. That is the standard American diet that tends to be a big driver of dysbiosis. The next one is overuse of antibiotics, right? So even the prescribed antibiotics, often they're prescribed for viral issues. Even the CDC almost 15 years ago said that about 50% of antibiotic prescriptions are not for bacterial infections. So I think we are absolutely overusing it. There's times when you need it and they could save your life, no doubt about that. But they are overused, and then they're also, of course, used in our food system, right? So then we're getting exposure there. Circadian disruption. So people not having a good circadian rhythm and practice. They're not sleeping at the right time, waking up at the right time. They're eating too late. It's really hard for the system to handle food when you eat really late, right? We're just not designed that way. Stress, right? Chronic stress is such a big driver. There was a publication in 2015 in Frontiers of Immunology that went through the whole pathology and all the studies around it, where they showed that stress-induced leaky gut was the number one cause of mortality and morbidity worldwide, right? That's an insane claim if you think about it, right? Stress-induced leaky gut causes more death and disability than anything else worldwide because it's implicated in the vast majority of chronic conditions. And then finally, the environment that we live in, right? We're over-sterilized within our environment. We're exposed to so many chemicals. We're exposed to so many microplastics, all of these things. That combination of all of these things is really an anti-human, anti-microbiome world.
Okay, this is just gold. So, real fast, would you mind telling people what you mean by over sterilized? We live in an over sterilized world.
Yeah, there's this issue around the hygiene hypothesis, right? Where we are basically bleaching and Cloroxing and sterilizing all surfaces within our homes, as an example. We've been programmed to think that fake lemon scent and that chlorine-like scent is quote unquote clean. But that has a detrimental effect to not only our microbiome, but our immune system, because we get no exposure to microbes adequately. We are designed to be in constant osmosis with the microbial world. We're sharing microbes, we're shedding microbes, we're bringing in microbes from the outside world, and all of those have a massive impact on our microbiome and immune system. I'll give a quick summation of a study that was very profound on this. There's something called the Finnish allergy study. This study was looking at why people in Finland, compared to towns in Russia that were geographically very close, why they had a very high level of allergies and asthma, especially among kids, compared to Russians in that same geographic area. And really came down to cleanliness practices, meaning the households and the schools and all that in Finland were over sterilized. Doors and windows were closed most of the time, circulating indoor air, not a lot of outside exposure. Compared to that in Russia, where they weren't sterilizing the surfaces, there's a lot of doors and windows open. So then what they did is they took some of the daycares in Finland and they made dirt piles. And then they had kids playing in the dirt piles a few times a week. And then they followed those kids compared to kids who weren't playing in dirt piles over a number of years. And they found that the prevalence rate of allergies, asthma, viral infections, and all that went way down for kids playing in the dirt piles. Right. So there's so many of those types of studies. And so, yes, we're absolutely over sterilizing our surfaces in our homes.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. Oops, I didn't mean to replace Spotlight. Let me bring the Spotlight back. My bad. Let me so so Kieran, you talked a little bit about the problem being the processed diet, and I think in your podcast, the average American is getting like 12 grams, 8 to 12 or something like that
Mm-hmm.
grams of soluble fiber per day. And so if the removal of that from the diet is part of the problem, can bringing the fiber back really fix it? And what about people that bring a little fiber back that have severe dysbiosis or GERD or SIBO or some of these things that the moment they bring fiber back,
Yeah.
gas, bloating, constipation, explosive diarrhea, right? All that stuff. So tell me a little bit about that. And then just to queue up a follow-up question, this is Benefiber. This costs about $20. And this is Metamucil here, and this costs about, I think, 30, maybe $35, right? And so, these are types of fiber that everybody sees in the grocery store, and they're very
Mm-hmm.
cheap. And then there's this, which is our twist on fiber, this balance. And this is a little bit more expensive. You can buy a box of this with a discount link for like $49. Why would somebody want more expensive fiber? Isn't it all just fiber? So, all right, that's
Yeah.
go ahead.
Really important question. So, okay, first part of the question: can you bring the fiber back, and then does that result in improvements and alleviation a lot of the problems? Absolutely, right. So one of the beauties of the gut and the gut microbiome, and the thing that makes me so passionate about it, is that it is an ecosystem, which means it's never too late to change it. It's never too late to fix it, right? And there's a little bit of a misnomer. Like, let's say you've had a really poor diet, you've had multiple courses of antibiotics. People say to themselves, "My good bacteria wiped out." Right? I've knocked out all my good bacteria. The thing about bacteria is you can never knock them out completely. Right? This is why all of those cleaning products you see say kills 99.9% of germs. Why does it say 99.9 and not 100% of germs? Because when we look at microbial disinfection, we use a logarithmic scale, right? So one log is a 90% killing, two logs is a 99% killing, three logs is 99.9. The thing is, you can almost never completely kill every microbe. And so even if you've had lots of antibiotics, you've had a poor diet, you've knocked down most of the good bacteria, the numbers are so low that they're not really functional, but they can always come back. And that's what's so exciting about the gut. You can always fix it. So when you start reintroducing fiber into your system, you start to see the changes happening because those microbes are now getting the food that they need, right? And the microbes, you give them a little bit of an edge by giving them fiber. They metabolize that fiber into other compounds that then suppress the growth of dysfunctional microbes, increase the growth of the microbes that they tend to collaborate with. They increase biofilm production to protect all the good microbes. They do all kinds of amazing things with that fiber. We just have to put it back into the system, right? And then what about the people who are highly sensitive to fiber, right? Like you mentioned, the SIBO people who are, or people who are on specific carbohydrate diets and so on. So fiber consumption causing bloating, discomfort, and all does not mean that the fiber is bad for you. It means that your system is not yet ready to utilize it, right? What does that mean as a result? It means you have to just go really slow, right? One of the things I always recommended to clinicians was help your patients microdose, if you will, the fiber throughout the day, right? So one of the things I used to do is just take tiny doses of it. If you have like a stick pack, right, which it comes in a convenient stick pack, you just have that stick pack open with you by your desk and just keep putting a small dollop of the powder in water and just drinking that down. If you take a small amount throughout the day, it'll negate a lot of the negative effects, but you still get the benefit from the fiber because it's a cumulative effect, right? Fiber is not like other nutrients or supplements where you have to get 500 milligrams at a time or 250 milligrams at a time. It's not based on a pharmacokinetic curve. It's about how much you get in there throughout the day. And yes, you might get a little bit of bloating, you might get a little bit of loose stool, but if you can tolerate it, it's perfectly fine, right? Because the benefits come at the other end of that tunnel. You want to walk through that as slowly as you need to, but once you get through that other end, your system completely reforms. There's a reason why there are meta-analysis studies. So these are studies of all the studies, right? There are meta-analysis studies of up to 900,000 subjects, right? Almost 30 million human years of data points in these studies on the use of fiber and its impact on health. And nothing else out there in the world of nutrition, food, pharmaceuticals does what it does. For every 10 grams of fiber you add to your daily diet, you can reduce all-cause mortality by 10%, according to this research, right? And that's up to about 45 grams of fiber, reducing it up to 45%, right? Just imagine that. We all have the power to reduce our all-cause mortality, which is all kinds of dysfunctions, right, by upwards of 45% just by getting our fiber intake up. So it's super exciting. And the reason for that is because the fiber feeds the microbiome, right? We can't absorb anything out of the fiber. We need it to feed the microbiome. We need it for metabolic health, and we need it to control our blood sugar levels and our satiety so that we're healthy metabolically and we have a healthy microbiome. Now, Why would you choose the balance? And Nancy was kind enough to send me some product a number of months ago, and I've been using it and really enjoying it. My personal fiber goals daily are around 45, 50 grams of fiber a day. So I love being able to take one of those stick packs before each meal because number one, it makes me eat way less. It blunts my glucose response. It helps with bowel movements and all that. But it also then knocks out a good 5 to 10 grams per meal already. But the reason you want to use this type of fiber versus the single ingredient, like benefiber and metamucil, is because your fiber intake, if you're supplementing with it, which I think everybody has to because it's so hard to get adequate fiber from just food. If you're supplementing with it, you want to mimic as much as you can what you're supposed to be getting from food, right? If you're eating a very diverse diet of lots of plant-based nutrients, fruits, vegetables, roots, tubers, seeds, and all that, what you end up getting there is a big diversity of fiber. What does that mean? That means varying amounts of viscosity of the fiber. Some soluble fiber will be very viscous, meaning they form a very viscous gel. Some will be much lighter and thinner, which means they move through the bowels at different speed, which means you get that viscosity and, if you will, lubrication of the bowels in a much more uniform way. And then you prolong the effect throughout the bowels as well. And then some fibers ferment faster than others, which you want. And they ferment by different organisms, right? So there are fibers that ferment faster from organisms in the proximal part of the large bowel. And then there are fibers that make their way all the way to the end of the large bowel and are fermented by those keystone species. And so you get urolithins out of them, you get short chain fatty acids, you get peptides being made out of them, and all of these amazing postbiotics. So if I'm going to consume a fiber, I want a fiber that is more diverse. It's more diverse in its viscosity, more diverse in its solubility, and more diverse in its rate of fermentation versus just one single product, right? I want to mimic eating a really diverse high fiber diet as much as I can.
Amazing. That was just amazing. Okay, couple more questions, and then we've got a couple stories we want to bring on with some gut health wins that I think you're gonna like, Kieran. And then I know that there's some questions. Guys, this call may go a little longer than normal because I want to give time for Q&A. This is a treat to have you here, Kieran. So what about fasting? What
Mm-hmm.
does fasting do for gut and gut repair?
Yeah, and just as a side note, I've been intermittent fasting now for 15 years. I picked it up almost 15 years ago, and I've been doing it. And it's a really interesting, simple thing you can do for your microbiome. Now, here's why it's beneficial. Your gut and your microbiome are diurnal systems, meaning they work off of a 24-hour clock. And especially your gut, if you think about the digestive system and then you think about the microbes within the digestive system, we'll talk about both of them. So the digestive system itself has a cleaning system throughout it. It's called the migrating motor complex, the MMC, right? It's an electrical sweeping of the digestive tract. Now, this is really important because you do not want to leave food particles that are fermentable food particles in the stomach or in the small bowel. And remember, the small bowel is the longest part of your digestive tract, right? Why do you not want to leave them in there? Because you don't want the microbes that live in the stomach or the small bowel to be able to ferment those food particles, right? Because that will cause all kinds of dysfunction. It'll cause inflammation, damage to the lining of those systems, because neither the stomach nor the small bowel are designed as fermentation systems. The large bowel is. That's its largest function, but the small bowel and the stomach aren't. So you have to be sweeping that stuff through. The migrating motor complex, that's one of its key roles. And then you get the peristaltic activity that goes behind it. So that has to happen on a regular basis. And then, of course, all of those bitter taste receptors and all of the receptors, the GLP-1 receptors, the PYY receptors, these are all the things that control metabolic response in your body. Those receptors have to be turned down, and then they have to be rebuilt again so that they have good sensitivity. So just think of the physical structures of your digestive tract needing to kind of fix, repair, and clean after it's gone through this period of eating, which is really tumultuous and messy and creates all of this dysfunction and disarray in that system, right? That cleaning phase only happens when you're fasting and when you're fasted. The microbiome is same, it's the same way. Now we want diversity in the microbiome. There are numerous organisms within the microbiome that only proliferate when you're not feeding the microbiome, right? Now that might be counterintuitive. I just said you want to feed your microbiome. Well, what that means actually is that the microbiome has different tiers of fermentation. It has the primary fermenters. These are the microbes that eat the fiber and the other dietary components. But as they're digesting those, they're making byproducts that feed the secondary fermenters within the gut. They digest those things and then they feed the tertiary fermenters. In order to get to the secondary and tertiary fermenters, you have to go through fasted states because those guys don't get to activate when food is continuously coming through the system. On top of that, the microbiome also turns on housekeeping genes, genes that are called autophagy genes or mitophagy genes that repair damaged cells, that repair the lining of the gut, that get rid of damaged proteins in the system. So all of this housekeeping work only happens during a fasted state, right? And then there are certain compounds that are produced during a fasted state, like BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which then helps and goes, repairs your central nervous system, and so on. And of course, your metabolic system can reset as well, and you can kick on fat burning in order to provide energy within the rest of your body. So there's numerous benefits for it: diversity in the microbiome, functioning of the digestive tract, improvement in your metabolic system, and improvement in the immune system are all parts of that.
Absolutely fascinating. I think all of us, I mean, you're getting lots of love in the chat right now, Kieran. A lot of people have been sharing your YouTube videos and Facebook pages and things like that, because this is just so good. And we're going to bring Kieran back here at the end for a brief Q&A. Now, we need to respect his time, and we also need to, there's 600 of you just in the live Zoom and thousands more on restreams and only one of Kieran. So we'll bring him back in just a moment. Thank you, Kieran. This is awesome.
First,
I wanted to bring in a couple of people, a couple of guests, just for a short story. These are people who have been living our protocol. And I'll explain the protocol. There are several new people here who may be a little bit in the dark on the protocol. I want to explain the protocol here in a moment. But before I explain the protocol, I want you to see what it can do. All right. And if you would just do me a favor, if you or somebody that you love has been following this protocol and you have noticed a measurable positive change, if you would put a sentence or two in the chat, I would love people to see what this protocol has done for you. Normally, I save that for the end, but if you'd put that in the chat, I would just love all those people who are new to see these stories. I want you to see what this protocol is doing for people, people that have been on it for a month or 6 months, or some of you a couple of years, right? And look at these stories that are coming in. I'm going to read some of these in a moment. Um, I have two people that have a gut specific story that I wanted to bring on tonight. And the first one is Brandon Farnsworth. Hey, Brandon, thanks for being here. We're glad you're here. Brandon, if you wouldn't mind, maybe tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Who is Brandon Farnsworth?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Brendan Farnsworth. I'm 45 years old, so I'm at that point where some of these things start showing up, and you want to get them taken care of. But I'm a father of four young boys. The oldest is 13, one on the way. So number five boy is coming, and so I need to be active a little bit longer. Most of my work is it's all labor based, and it was taking its toll on my body, stuff that I just thought, I'm just getting old, this is just how it's going to be. So I've been actively trying to just find whatever that thing is to help me feel better and do better.
Okay, tell me, where were you at with your health and your gut prior to starting this protocol?
Okay, so I've been very active, specifically in sports, for most of my life. Because of that, I've had multiple surgeries, both of my knees, 3 surgeries on one, 2 on the other, patellar tendonitis in both. I haven't been able to run for years, let alone jump, just the normal things that you would think you'd be able to do. I have also, as far as my physical, I was slightly overweight as well. Not too bad, but about 50 pounds overweight, I guess. As far as my gut goes, I didn't really know what the problem was. My entire life, I've been allergic to fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, the more I learn, the more I feel like maybe allergy is the wrong term. But ever since I was in my early teens, fresh fruits and vegetables was a no-go for me.
What would happen if you ate fresh fruits and vegetables?
So they varied. Melons, avocados, pineapple, things like that were the worst. But I would always have terrible itching sensations all over in my mouth, inside, down my throat, a stomach ache. The outside of my face would itch all the way up through my ears. As I got older, those symptoms got worse. I never did have an opportunity, a time where I had restricted breathing, but I did have restricted swallowing where there were times where it was just, I couldn't swallow it down and I ended up having to throw it up, which you do that a couple times and you decide, well, I'm just not going to eat those anymore.
Yeah, okay. So you've been on the protocol now for how long and what has happened? I'm going to bring up a picture here while you're talking of your before and after, but what has happened to your body and then what has happened with the fruits and veggies?
Okay. So my wife's been on the protocol for a little over a year and she tried and tried and tried to get me to do it. I took some drinks here and there. I never took it seriously, but 3 months ago, I started the protocol as I was supposed to. So I've been on it for 3 months now. Within those 3 months, I've lost a little over 30 pounds. As far as the metabolic stuff, the inflammation in my knees is gone. Sorry, I didn't. I was able to run.
It's great, brother. Yeah, it's great.
My oldest son does cross country, and I was able to run with him. So that was pretty cool. Increased energy. My acid reflux is gone. I no longer have sugar cravings. I was a huge Mountain Dew guy, like 2 or 3 a day. And I have not had one in 3 months. That's not a willpower thing. It's just no more craving for that. No more desire for that. My triglycerides have been cut in half, actually a little more. They're down to actually 44. So just things like that. As far as the fruits and vegetables, within 3 days, I noticed the first, where I was like, whoa, what's going on? I had forgotten to have the tomato removed from a hamburger that I had gotten, and I ate it, and I thought, I told my wife, I was like, I don't feel anything. Nothing's happening. It's kind of strange. And then a few days later, same kind of thing. I had a few bites of her salad and nothing happened. I thought, wow, this isn't normal. So then I started experimenting. I ate an orange with no side effects. I had pineapple for the first time in 25 years, which that stuff's amazing. I don't know if any of you have, enjoyed pineapple, but I love it. A chocolate covered strawberry, things like that. I've experimented with avocados, melons, everything that I can think of. And I've had no reactions at all since starting the protocol.
Okay. This is amazing, Brandon. Thank you so much. I'm just going to flash real fast your before and after. This is amazing, and I actually am so grateful that you shared this part about being able to run with your son. That is Brandon then, and you see Brandon now. 3 months on the protocol, and while you look, like you're ready to go out for Baywatch audition, I think the part about your son and your gut is even a bigger win. So, way to go, brother. Thank you so much for being our story. We got one more story.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brandon. Really, really appreciate you. I'm going to replace your spotlight with our next guest, who is Kelly Trounce. Hey, Kelly. Kelly, you've got quite a story when it comes to gut health as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had I had IBS, chronic IBS and pain since I was in my early teens. I'm 51, so like 35 years of really bad pain. Um, I I would go, it was at least like 5 times a week, if not nightly. I'd end up with a heating pad on my belly and just be in bed and be miserable. Everything that Karen talked about, I was like, wow, every single one of those things was me, just really, really uncomfortable. And I honestly didn't even start the Feel Great system to heal my gut because I kind of had just decided this is life and I've tried everything. I've taken gut health courses. I eat healthy, I mean, mostly. And there's just something's wrong. This is just how my body is. I'm just extra sensitive. And so I kind of just I kind of just went with that. So I didn't actually even start the Feel Great system. I was like complaining about 100 other things as I approached 50, which was like the brain fog and the energy and being super fatigued after like a hard workout. I've always loved to exercise and health and all of that. And so that was really, I had gone to a nurse practitioner to just see if someone would listen to me about all of my different things that I was upset about. And she was the one that said, hey, everything you're complaining about is like pointing to insulin resistance, which surprised me. And then she also checked my labs and I was pre-diabetic, which also surprised me. So even though I seemed to be doing all the right things, that was my outside story and my inside story was very different.
Okay, so you were struggling with all that for literally decades, and then you get on this protocol and give us a little bit of the timeline. How long did it take, and what did you notice first, and where are things at now?
Okay, so I started the protocol, and right away I had like that better energy that everyone was talking about, and I was super excited about that. The balance was tricky. I was really sensitive, and it was hard to adjust. So, my coach Brittany was like, "Hey, just try little bits at a time." So I was trying to do a half a packet here and there, and just trying to increase it in small amounts, but it did make me gassy, but like I am bloated, but I was that way anyway. So I just kind of went with it. I liked the extra energy and I kept at it. 3 months in, my nurse practitioner did labs again and I was no longer pre-diabetic. So I guess that was a big win. And she was actually the one that told me this just doesn't change overnight like that. So whatever you're doing, keep doing. So I stuck with it. I still was feeling pretty inflamed. I really hadn't lost the extra weight that I had gained in those perimenopause years, but I loved the energy. And so I kept at it. Around month 6, I had heard other people taking extra balance, a balance before lunch and a balance before dinner. And I just decided to give it a try and see what that little experiment might do. And so the first day I did one with lunch and one with dinner. By this time, my body was obviously really adjusted to the fiber. And but I still was having flare-ups. That hadn't disappeared. I was still having flare-ups, not as often, but they were still there with my stomach. And that first night, I thought, wow, I didn't have any stomach pain today. And then the next day, I did it again and no stomach pain. And it went from daily to weekly to monthly. By about 2 months, I actually started telling my family, guys, I have not had a stomach pain in 2 months because I just didn't really want to jinx it. It was so shocking to me. And I'm now over the year mark of no stomach pains. And for having it for 35 years, it's like, it so blows my mind that my body could heal in that way. I didn't even expect it. Like I said, I didn't take the Feel Great system thinking it would help my stomach. I just thought that was life. And I like my husband the other day said, I've known you for 30 plus years and I've known you to have stomach aches constantly. And for the past year, none. This is amazing. So for me, it was just a total miracle. I had other amazing things. My like the prediabetes was away. I can continue to decrease in that. My cholesterol has decreased. So I've had other really amazing things. I lost 25 pounds. I don't get achy and tired after exercises. In fact, I teach strength training, and I used to just think that I pushed so hard, and that's why I was tired when I'd come home. But now I realize like I actually have more energy when I exercise hard. I'm not depleted at all. So there's all these other wins, but the one that I expected the least is by far my favorite, and that's a healed gut. And I've realized that that's like once that happened, that's when everything started improving. That's when the weight came off. That's when all these other things happened. That gut took a long time. And so I guess my thing would be to say, if you're not experiencing gut relief yet, or if you're not experiencing relief yet, maybe you don't even feel that gut pain, but to hang on to it, because when that heals, like you experience like overall health that I just didn't even know I could have.
Unreal. Thank you so much. I'm just glowing. Would you do me a favor, Kelly and Brandon? There are many people who might want to follow you guys on social. Would you mind putting your handles in the chat? If anybody wants to follow you, and Kieran Christian, if you would put your handles or where people can follow you in the chat, I want everybody to be able to have access to this. This is so, so awesome. Okay, we have very little time and a lot to cover, and I want to do a little bit of Q&A if we still have a few minutes with Kieran. So I want to explain the protocol, and we knew this call would go a little bit longer, but it's just so good. I mean, this is so good. This is what it's all about. Changing lives, making life better for other people, right? So I'm going to explain the protocol, and I want to we talk about metabolic health so much that tonight I also want to do a little spin where I show the gut health benefits, the gut health wins. And of course, you've heard that with both Brandon and Kelly now. But so here's just a couple. This is our friend Terry Swartout in Michigan. Okay. This is her psoriasis before and after the protocol. Look at that. Think about how that would change your everyday life. This is my buddy Cody. We've been friends for 20 years. This is him about 7, 8 months-ish on the protocol. Not only did it change his whole life, when I asked Cody what he's most excited about, he said, Trent, it's actually not the weight loss. It's that for the first time in more than a decade, I am regular on the toilet. We've got our very own Sheridan Shares, who is a huge influencer, as well as Natalie Z Girl, who both of these are big influencers, make a lot of content about metabolic health and especially mental health. Both of these women who struggled with depression aren't struggling with depression anymore. We have lots of comments in the chat. I just grabbed a few of them every single week of people saying they're off their antidepressants or the depression symptoms are gone. All of these seemingly unrelated things are tied back to the gut. This is my sweet little sister, Abby. If you look closely, you can see the red flare up around her nostrils and on her eyelids and on her nose. This is Abby on the protocol without the same flare-ups. In fact, we had to turn up the lighting. We tried to turn up the lighting on the second photo just to see it, and we couldn't see it. This is beautiful Abby before and beautiful Abby after. Okay. So something is happening here, and it's at a very deep level. It's at the level of the gut. And how we're able to do this, we talked about the insulin resistance and how we address that with this protocol. And today, thanks to Kieran, we've talked about how we can also address the gut. Okay. Now, if you are new, let me just quickly explain the protocol. Okay. This is something that is not just some random supplement or snake oil. This is something that has been studied and is continuing to be studied at multiple institutions. There's more than 20 clinical studies. This is something that is out there with no drugs in it. It is a nutraceutical and it works, as you can see from the comments and from the stories, fantastically. It is very simple. There are two components, fasting and fiber. The fasting is something that we do daily. And whenever we're taking a break from food, either between meals or if, let's say, you skip a meal like breakfast each day, you can sip the Unimate when fasting. This is our twist on fasting that makes fasting effortless. Unimate, when I sip it, it just makes me forget about food, right? When it's time to eat, I will have a blend of this fiber. We've talked about it a lot on tonight's call, but this blend of fiber before meals helps feed and nourish the gut microbiome. It helps feed and nourish those commensal, those good, healthy microbes. It also is incredible for satiety, for blood sugar control, triglycerides, cholesterol. It is absolutely a game changer. Now, if you were to go try to buy this direct from the factory, it costs about $235 per month, plus tax, plus shipping. But because you're on this call and because somebody's invited you that has a discount link, the price is just $159 a month. That's about $5 a day. I mean, that's less money than you'll save just by skipping a meal each day. It literally pays for itself, right? When you use the discount link, it will lock in this pricing so that you'll never have to pay the full price. And if you want to order it, whoever invited you to this call, just send them a text that says, give me the link or send me the link. And they'll be able to send you this discount link. And as soon as you use the discount link, you'll have your own discount link that you can share to pay the discount forward to anybody who you'd like to share the protocol with. Now, this protocol, if you're skeptical, don't be skeptical. All right. It's in the physician's desk reference. It is HSA qualified. It is FSA qualified. I believe we are going to change metabolic health and gut health with this simple two-step protocol. And the good news is you don't actually have to take my word for it. I'll read a couple of these stories in the chat before we open up the Q&A. So I asked if you've been on this protocol, what has it done for you? Here's a couple things that were written in the chat. Jamie Ortiz, I'm down 42.5 pounds. Inflammation is decreasing. My migraine headaches are gone. My brain fog is lifted. My IBS is gone. Wow. Okay. Let's see here. Olalu says, I just started last week. Renee says 2 years on the protocol, down 100 pounds, off medications, vertigo and inflammation gone. Natalie says, I've reversed my depression in 3 weeks. No more food noise. I've lost 25 pounds. Maureen Doyle says, bloating is gone. Heartburn is gone. Angela Vandenboss says, got my life back, 63 years old. Aviv Bar says down 30 pounds. Sarah Lowe says lower blood sugar, lower cholesterol, lost weight, no more food noise. Dr. Urban A. Kiernan says, did pre and post DEXA scan and lost 50% of my visceral fat. Incredible. Just a couple more. Barbara Outlaw, 50 pounds down, no more brain fog, A1C is down. Kendra Crop says, my IBS is gone. My IBS was gone in 3 days. Wow, that's crazy. Chronic fatigue, gone. Megan O'Brien says, skin tag's gone. I've lost weight. I've kept it off for 3 years now. Energy up, hormones balanced. One more, Diane Weaver. And there's literally 130 additional comments here that I don't have time to read. Diane Weaver, no more inflammation, no more acid reflux, no more leaky gut. Blood pressure normalized. Finally sleeping. I lost 40 pounds in 3.5 months. My husband's off his acid reflux meds. He's off his statin drugs for cholesterol. My mom has reversed type 2 diabetes and is off her statin medications. My mother-in-law, we got the whole family going here, the whole Weaver family. Mother-in-law is off blood pressure medications in 2 months. She was on those meds for 20 years, off in 2 months. No longer needs oxygen, off her statins, no longer pre-diabetic, and they've both lost 40 to 50 pounds. There are 100 more comments that I could read, but we don't have time. In fact, I'm over the time limit. But with a few minutes of the wonderful Kiran Krishnan, our guest tonight, we thought we'd just ask a couple of questions. Now, Kiran, I promise to respect your time here. We will go quickly and we will wrap up quickly, but there are lots and lots of questions. Aaron Nielsen wants to ask about celiac. So let's just broad picture, let's talk, or big picture, let's talk about celiac. Do you see people reversing or improving their celiac with fiber therapy?
Yeah. So certainly improving how the gut feels and how the gut handles food in general, right? So one of the big impacts that occurs in celiac with time with exposure with gluten is something called enteropathy. Enteropathy is basically the shrinking of the microvilli. So if you remember, your small intestine has these finger-like projections, and on top of those fingers there are additional fingers, in fact, and that adds to the surface area because that's the absorptive surface. Now, what tends to happen in people with celiac over time is there's so much inflammation and so much damage that those finger-like projections start to shrink. And when you start to shrink, you start to reduce dramatically the digestive surface and the absorptive surface. That leads to a lot of nutrient dysfunction in celiac individuals. There are studies that show that when you increase the diversity in the gut microbiome, you increase the production of short-chain fatty acids, which are both results of increased fiber intake. You can start to increase those finger-like projections again and start rebuilding that mucosal signature within the gut. The gut can repair. It's really, really good at repairing. We turn over the entire lining of our gut every 72 hours in a normal state, right? So putting that fiber back in resets that ability.
Amazing. GERD. What about GERD?
Yeah, so GERD is a pressure issue more often than not, right? So there's a combination of issues here. So you've got reduced hydrochloric acid. And as a result of reduced hydrochloric acid, you get overgrowth of microbes in the very distal part of the stomach, where you shouldn't be having a lot of microbes. Because remember, the stomach is quite acidic, and it prevents most of the microbes from growing. So stress, leaky gut, and nutrient deficiencies like zinc deficiencies and all that can reduce stomach acid production, thereby increasing fermentation that occurs in the stomach itself. When you eat, that fermentation produces gas, and that gas pushes things up. That's the reflux part of it. And then you get the pyloric sphincter, which is the sphincter that separates the stomach from the esophagus. And that sphincter becomes dysfunctional over time because of all the pressure, the continuous pressure. I think one of the testimonials here is that their reflux was gone, right? And remember, reflux is not an issue of too much acid. That is a misconception, right? This is why they sell acid blockers and all that. It's not an issue of too much acid. It's an issue of too little acid. And fixing the gut, reestablishing the gut-brain connection and all that reestablishes that stomach acid.
Amazing. Thank you. So, Kieran, we've had a lot of people who have had great success with colitis and Crohn's.
Mm-hmm.
Why would that be? Why would people with colitis, Crohn's often do very well on this protocol? In fact, some people saying their colitis is literally gone. Symptoms are gone.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what's happening in both colitis and Crohn's. So they both fall under a category of IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, right? The big difference is that colitis happens in the colon, hence its name. Crohn's is a very similar pathology, but can happen anywhere in the digestive tract. But the pathologies are the same. Basically, what's happening is there's a thinning of the mucosal lining of the gut, and then you're losing tolerance, immune tolerance. Thereby, your immune system ends up not only attacking things that are coming into your digestive tract and colon, which is right at the lining of the gut, it also accidentally starts attacking your own tissue in the lining of the gut. So one of the reasons that happens is because of really low diversity, really low levels of a type of organism called Faecalibacteria prausnitzii, and really low levels of butyrate, right? That is very much aligned with the risk of developing IBD. Now, when you take fiber and you take a diversity of fiber, which is really important, and you start bringing that Faecalibacteria prausnitzii microbe back up and you start bringing butyrate back up, it fixes that immune dysregulation and it rebuilds the lining of the colon and the rest of the intestines, right? So when you look at studies on IBD in the microbiome, there's an inverse correlation to butyrate production and Faecalibacteria prausnitzii, which is a keystone strain. When you have good levels of those, you're completely protected against inflammatory bowel conditions. And fiber is the one way to bring those up.
Amazing. Asking for a friend. There's a comment here in the chat, but it was funny. Somebody who passes gas frequently, is that a sign of a healthy microbiome or an unhealthy microbiome?
Yeah, great question. In fact, it kind of depends on what the gas smells like. That's the key, right? Now, passing gas and having flatulence, perfectly normal. Your bowel is designed for that. It's designed to handle that. Hence, it comes out, and it makes its loud, funny sound. But there was a time when passing gas was actually very fashionable because it indicated that you were eating well, you were well nourished, and so on. Now, if that gas smells very sulfury, then it's more problematic, right? Why is that a problem? Well, because what tends to happen is you likely have a dysbiosis, again, an imbalance of microbes. You have a high level of microbes called sulfate-reducing bacteria. What does that mean? That means the sulfates that are coming in the diet, and this is a lot of healthy foods have high sulfate content, like eggs, for example, or leeks and garlic and things like that. Those sulfate-reducing bacteria are converting the dietary sulfate into a gas called hydrogen sulfide. And that gas not only creates a lot of inflammation in the large bowel, but it also creates that obnoxious smell, right? So flatulence is okay, but the really obnoxious sulfur-smelling flatulence is not a good sign.
Okay, great. Maybe two more questions.
Yeah.
Carnivore diet. A lot of people say I went on the carnivore diet and my gut got much, much better, right? That is hard for many people because many people like carbohydrates and it's hard for them to be disciplined enough to cut all out. What is the long-term trade-off of going carnivore strict?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in number one, there hasn't been a single type of human in the history of the human race that has eaten purely carnivore. That's also a misnomer, right? So oftentimes people will say, oh, what about the Inuit Indians that survive predominantly on seal blubber and all that? That's actually not true. There's a couple of aspects of that. Number one, they eat a lot of winter berries and shrubs. And so they do get a lot of polyphenols and fiber in their diet. And it's also been discovered that they have a genetic anomaly that helps them metabolize fat differently than most other individuals. So it is very unusual for a human to consume a meat or carnivore only diet. What tends to happen is you're basically eliminating fiber. And if you eliminate fiber, you dramatically increase your long term mortality and morbidity rates. You might feel better in the short term. And the reason why people tend to feel better is when you go carnivore, you're basically eliminating sugar. Right. So, number one, it's a low to no sugar diet. That's going to make you feel better and lose more weight. And then you're also calorically deficit because carnivore style eating, steaks and all that, are very filling. And as a result, you don't consume as many calories. So you will lose weight. You may feel more energetic. Your blood sugar levels, insulin levels may improve temporarily, but there is a price to pay for that because diversity in the gut microbiome starts to shrink very rapidly. We're talking 8 weeks, 12 weeks, a dramatic shift in diversity that then has a long-term consequence on your overall health.
Amazing. This has been so great. Thank you. I've kept you 10 minutes over time. Kieran, we loved
No
it.
problem.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the audience where they might follow you or listen to you or support you? I mean, thank you for coming on our call voluntarily. This is so nice of you. What would you say if somebody wanted to follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I never pass up the opportunity to talk gut microbiome and all that. Having all this information in my head helps nobody. So I got to be able to talk about it, right? So thank you for this opportunity. I put out a lot of educational information on my Instagram page, which is at Kiran Biome, Kiran Biome. And in one statement, I'm hearing all of these testimonials and those two amazing cases you brought up, and it sounds kind of crazy, right? That all these things get improved by just adding fiber, adding intermittent fasting. But I can tell you, I'm currently teaching a microbiome course for clinicians. It's 11 module course. It's like 38 hours of coursework, very, very, comprehensive and involved. And we go through every disease process and pathology and all of that. And we cover virtually every chronic condition. And the thing is, at the end of every module, when I'm talking about the solutions, every single one of those disease pathologies, fiber and increasing the diversity of the gut microbiome is step one, right? Because, and I connect in all of those modules, the impact that it has on all of these pathologies in the body. So what you guys all know now from this very simple and accessible protocol is things that clinicians are still trying to learn to figure out how to help their patients, right? So I really appreciate the accessibility of making this so easy with the balanced products. I've been using it, makes it easy for me to get my fiber in every day. Thank you for this opportunity to get me to present here. And I look forward to doing it again at some point.
That would be amazing, Kieran. Thank you so much. Kieran Krishnan, guys, go follow him at Kieran Biome. So good. If you or somebody you love is struggling with your metabolic health, invite them to this call next week. They will thank you later. Thanks for having a wonderful chat today. Wonderful stories. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Kieran. This was awesome. So we'll see you guys next week. And thanks for tuning in.